Hello and welcome back to another edition of the GSMC College Football Podcast, presented to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Jake Daly. Today is Tuesday, April 29th. We've got a good show for you today. I'm going to recap some of what happened in the spring transfer portal as it has officially closed now. Also, going to go over some of the next guys up, some guys that can be replacing NFL first-round picks, and what their outlook might be for this upcoming year. We're also going to talk a little bit about some undrafted free agents who I think could make an impact at the next level and NFL rosters. Also going to touch on the Pac-12 TV deal that just was announced this morning, as well as finishing up with, could Arch Manning actually stay at Texas for 2 years? I think it's something that's really interesting and more of a possibility than people think. But before I do anything else, I just want to remind everyone that we love hearing from you during our show. We want to make this show as interactive, as exciting as possible. So whether that's a comment, question, opinion, hot take, whatever you have, we love to hear it. One easy way to do that is to use the Super Chat feature. To do that, you go ahead, click the $ in the bottom of the chat box to ensure that your comment, question, whatever, hot take, gets read, gets on the air. It's also just a fantastic way to support our channel and what we're doing here at GSMC. We couldn't do what we do without your ongoing support. We're so grateful to have you all as a part of our community. So I want to touch a little bit about just kind of what happened in the spring transfer portal. Obviously, the biggest thing, Nico Iamaleava, his whole saga, leaving Tennessee, skipping that Friday practice, coming, and it's still kind of a question mark. Was it more an NIL-based decision, and he just didn't get what he thought he would on the market? Or was this more actually what the Iamaleava's family was saying, and this had more to do with Tennessee's scheme, with their offensive weapons, their offensive line? I'm not really sure. I think it's kind of both ways, and it sounds like this whole thing, it just makes a lot of sense for Nico to get out of Tennessee. I don't know if he's in a better situation now. I think, honestly, from an on-field perspective, he's joining a worse team in UCLA who doesn't have as many weapons as he had at Tennessee with him. But on the flip side of that, though, the offense that UCLA is going to run is going to be a more pro-style offense than that Veer kind of Josh Heupel offense that's super spread out, a pretty quarterback-friendly offense at Tennessee. So in terms of potentially looking towards the 2026 draft, could that have been a decision in that where Nico wanted to get in more of a pro-style offense to prepare for the draft, to give scouts kind of a look of what he could do in an offense that's a little more conducive to the pros? And then you had the other quarterback that UCLA had picked up in the winter portal in Joey Aguilar. He needed a new home after Nico went to UCLA. He decides, hey, I'm going to go replace him at Tennessee. And that's also a move that makes a lot of sense. Joey Aguilar, 2-year veteran starter for Appalachian State, about 7,000 passing yards in those 2 seasons combined. So this is a guy that has had some production, gives a little bit of a veteran presence to that Tennessee quarterback room. It's going to be really interesting to see kind of who wins this quote-unquote quarterback trade, whether it's UCLA, whether it's Tennessee, and who the winners losers are there. I think that's going to be kind of interesting just in terms of how that'll shake out. Though there were some teams that I think had some really solid pickups just in this spring portal, one of those being Texas. The Longhorns, they obviously have top 5 recruiting classes coming out of high school, so they're more looking to fill certain holes rather than overhaul the entire roster. And they picked up some really solid guys that can fill a couple of those holes. The first one, I think, is Emmett Mosley V from Stanford. Had a really great freshman season. He was tied for the lead for Stanford in touchdown catches last year. could be a guy that can fill that number 3 wide receiver role for the Longhorns. It really sounds like Ryan Wingo is going to kind of take over as that main go-to guy for Texas. Him and Arch seem to have some pretty solid chemistry and had a really great season last year as a true freshman, 430 receiving yards. But this is going to be a guy that's going to step back into that wide receiver 1 role. Emmett Mosley the fifth, though, I think he's a guy that could very easily develop and become a go-to wide receiver for Texas down the line. And he's also got 3 years of eligibility left. This is a guy that I think was a really solid pickup. And then also still on the offensive side of the ball, they picked up Cal tight end Jack Endries. Jack Endries had 91 receptions in the last 2 seasons. And Texas looking to replace Gunnar Helm, his production at that tight end position. This is a guy that has proven production at Cal, put up some really solid numbers the past 2 years. He's going to give Texas, Arch Manning, that kind of safety, blanket, target across the middle that they're going to lose in Gunnar Helm. So Jack Endries could be a guy that comes in right away, fills that hole that Gunnar Helm left, and is a really productive tight end for them. And then on the defensive side, they also picked up Murad Watson, transfers from Syracuse, also Levon Johnson from Maryland. Both of those guys are going to help shore up that interior of the defensive line where Texas is losing multiple veterans. So picking up those 2 guys to fill another big gap in that team, I think it was a really solid pickup for Texas. They also picked up a kicker. Bert Auburn, their kicker last year, he really struggled late in the season, entered the portal, and they picked up Mason Shipley from Texas State, 31 of 35 on field goal attempts last season. Could be a guy that can upgrade that kicking game for Texas, make them a more well-rounded team overall as they go and push for a college football berth in the playoff and possibly a college championship. I also really liked what Oklahoma State did in this portal window. They got 9 transfers in the spring. Mike Gundy and his staff are really looking to overhaul this team after a 3-9 season in which they really struggled. They bring in Marshall's 2024 leading receiver and Christian Fitzpatrick. Also bring in a couple of D2 guys that really were stars at that level. Cam Abshire from Emory and Henry, as well as Terrell Davis, Central Oklahoma. Those were 2 guys that put up big numbers in D2. Could be guys that could help fill out that wide receiver room for the Cowboys. Also got some help along the offensive line, as well as at running back. And I think this is a team that could potentially be a lot better than they were last season. And then Texas Tech, I think, also had a really great portal. They had a great portal overall, just in terms of winter and spring. Overall, they had about 20 transfers come in, spent a bunch of money this year. But one of the biggest guys they got was in this spring in Stanford edge rusher David Bailey. Decided to transfer after Stanford fired head coach Troy Taylor. But this is a guy that could be an All-American, that type of level of player on the edge. Also, get Micah Hudson back. He was a 5-star that had been at Texas Tech, joined Texas A&M in the winter portal, and decided to come back to Texas Tech. And this is a guy that was a really high 4-star, low 5-star recruit, a guy that they had big expectations for in Lubbock, and he's going to come back and play for them again. Also, Penn State, I think they picked up Trevor Pena from Syracuse. I really liked that move for them. Wide receiver, big position of need for them. Pena, Syracuse's leading receiver last year, had a little under 1,000 receiving yards, but gives them a proven target to go with Kyron Hudson and Devontae Ross, who are 2 other transfers they bring in, trying to remold that room. I really liked what they did there. And then just in terms of total numbers, there were more than 1,100 FBS scholarship players to enter the portal in the last month, average of about 8 players per team. To get a sense of like the type of guys that enter the portal, so more than half, 600 plus, they appeared in fewer than 12 games in their career. More than 80%, there was about 950 plus, just under 1,000. they had started fewer than 10 career games, and then nearly half had fewer than 100 career snaps. So the vast majority of guys that are hitting the portal were guys that weren't really getting playing time, guys that were backups or younger kids that just maybe were looking for a better situation or just didn't really want to try to wait their turn. But it wasn't a lot of proven veterans, wasn't a lot of guys that had a lot of production. For the vast majority of these guys, they're kids that were backups, third string, fourth string, that were maybe just trying to look for a better opportunity. There's a couple guys that have entered the portal that are still not committed. One that actually I had written down, but he did commit a couple hours ago. Hakeem Williams, he was Florida State commit, originally signed with them in 2023. Number 4 overall wide receiver in the country in his class. Number 24 prospect overall nationally, but never really kind of broke through in his first 2 years. He appeared in 8 games as a true freshman, managed 8 starts in 2024, but he only caught 21 passes for just under 300 receiving yards during that time. But he is now committed as of today to the Colorado Buffaloes. Colorado looking to replace not just Travis Hunter, but also Jimmy Horn Jr., LeJounte Wester. Those 3 guys all got drafted, and they're going to have to replace a lot of production in that wide receiver room. This could be a guy that could maybe step up and help them out there in that category. AJ Halsey, former Houston player. This guy is one of the most productive players in the portal, most experienced guys. He was all Big 12 first team last year in 2024, tied the conference for interceptions, had 5 total, leading the conference. Also finished second in the Big 12, had 13 passes defended, and also just had 74 total tackles, 172 stops over 2 years of college football. And it sounds like right now he's between Miami or Ole Miss. Commitment is expected pretty soon there. But this is going to be a big pickup for whoever does actually get AJ Halsey. And then another guy I had is Amari Campbell, linebacker out of North Carolina. He actually had entered the portal in December, then decided against leaving when UNC hired Bill Belichick, then came back in the spring and decided to re-enter the portal. It does sound like he will be transferring. Second among UNC defenders last year with 76 total tackles, also had 6.5 sacks, and then he led UNC with 10.5 tackles for loss this season. One team I'm looking at as a potential option for Amari Campbell is the Penn State Nittany Lions, and he is set for a visit there this upcoming weekend. So we'll kind of see how that visit goes. Could he end up being a Penn State Nittany Lion? It's very possible, but another guy that's a really solid option still out there in this transfer portal window, but much more active than I think we were anticipating. Obviously, with the fallout from the Nico Iamaleava drama, that situation really seemed to come out of nowhere and threw this whole spring portal window for a loop. But there's going to be some big moves here and some teams that I think will have really big impacts in this season from this window. So we're going to take our first break of the show right now. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the next guys up, some of the guys who are going to be replacing 2025 NFL first rounders and what that could look like. We will be back shortly on the GSMC College Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, I'll diss my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing losing it. The noose it fits, some lucid shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip. You choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
Welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast, presented to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Just talked a little bit about the spring transfer portal, that window, kind of some of the big storylines there. I want to talk a little bit about some of the guys that could be next up in terms of replacing some of the NFL first-round draft picks. Not going to obviously go through all 32 picks, but just going to talk about some of the guys that I really like and some of the more interesting changes that are going to happen in this upcoming season. So, obviously, number 1 overall pick, Cam Ward to the Tennessee Titans out of Miami. And, obviously, Miami got another big transfer portal quarterback in Carson Beck, former Georgia quarterback. This is going to be a big question of whether he can actually replicate what Cam Ward did at Miami, whether he can lead them to a little more team success. And also, Beck has a nagging elbow injury from the college football playoff that has kept him out of spring practice entirely right now. So he's expected to be cleared to participate fully this summer for player-led practices. And that's going to be really important, obviously, as he also looks to gain chemistry with a brand new wide receiver group. One big difference from last year to this year, Cam Ward came into a really experienced wide receiver room at Miami, led by Xavier Restrepo, and Carson Beck is not going to have that. He's coming in with pretty much an entire new pass-catching group. Young guys, talented guys, but they're going to have to prove themselves. So it's going to be a little bit of a different circumstance there compared to what Cam Ward came into last season. And obviously, we know that Carson Beck has the arm talent to get this done. That's always been one of his big pluses as a quarterback, is the arm talent. And Miami's scheme is much more high-powered offensively compared to what Georgia ran. So this could be a place where Carson Beck could really thrive as a quarterback. I think he probably honestly had a better 2023 season, but that's also, you're playing with Ladd McConkey, Brock Bowers. Those are going to be some guys that, yeah, they're not bad football players, I would say. But 2023 completed about 72% of his passes, had 3,900 passing yards, 24 touchdowns, 6 interceptions. Struggled a little more this last season in 2024. Completion percentage dropped to about 64%. Had 12 interceptions, did increase his touchdowns to 28, but also that interception total went up. And then also he struggled against some of the bigger programs. At Alabama, early on in the season, went 27 of 50, had 3 touchdowns, but also had 3 interceptions in that game. At Texas, 23 of 41, 0 touchdowns, 3 interceptions in that game. Georgia did still win that game 30-15 though. But then at Ole Miss, 20 of 31, 0 touchdowns, 1 interception, and then also had 5 combined interceptions against Florida and Mississippi State. So that's going to be a big question mark here, is decision making. Can he cut down on that total? Can the offensive scheme give him a little more options? And can he kind of thrive there, similar to what Cam Ward did? Another guy I'm looking at, obviously, so Jackson Dart, the other quarterback that was drafted in the first round, he's gone at Ole Miss, and it sounds like he's going to be replaced by Austin Simmons. Ole Miss elected to not go after a veteran quarterback in the portal. They did pick up Division II All-American Trinidad Chambliss, who had 51 combined touchdowns last year and 25 rushing touchdowns as a quarterback, which I thought was pretty incredible. But this is Austin Simmons' job to lose. This is a guy that he reclassified from 2025 to 2023, enrolled early as a 17-year-old at Ole Miss. Also was a member of the Ole Miss baseball team the past 2 seasons. Made 13 relief appearances for them last year. But done with baseball, focusing only on football. Left-handed quarterback, and I really am high on Austin Simmons. I think he's a guy that can do a lot, has all the physical traits. Also, I think has it mentally to be able to be a really good starting quarterback for Ole Miss. Has spent 2 years behind Jackson Dart, just developing, learning, getting comfortable in the system, in the scheme. Only has played 79 snaps in his career, but really showcased what he could do in that Georgia win when he had a 75-yard touchdown drive and he just looked incredible in that game. Came in, Jackson Dart got hurt pretty early and just showed a ton of poise, showed control, command of that offense. I think that's going to be a guy that can really be a breakout star in the SEC this upcoming year. Will Campbell, this is going to be a big guy that they lost at LSU from the time he came on campus as a true freshman, basically entrenched as that left tackle for the past 3 years. And LSU's losing 4 starting offensive linemen this year. It sounds like the guy that's going to replace Will Campbell is going to be Tyree Williams. So when Will Campbell sat out the bowl game, Tyree Williams stepped into that spot. Also seems to have kind of held on to it throughout the spring. And this is a guy that's 6'7", 310, but also incredibly versatile. Had snaps at 4 different positions last year. Left tackle, left guard, right guard, right tackle. Only didn't play center. And hasn't allowed a sack in 82 pass blocking opportunities. Has kind of embraced being one of the leaders on that offensive line for LSU this upcoming year. I think he's going to have a pretty good season, but that's got some really big shoes to fill with Will Campbell, what he did for the past 3 years at LSU. It's going to be tough to kind of replace that and step into that role as the blindside protector for Garrett Nussmeier. We'll see if Tyree Adams can actually fill it. I'm pretty confident that he can, just based on his production, versatility, a lot of different things, but I think that's a guy that can really be a solid left tackle for LSU. One of the teams I'm looking at, I guess, picks as well, Mason Graham and Kenneth Grant from Michigan, both first rounders. I'm going to kind of combine them, but that's both of those guys, really big loss for Michigan. You lose 2 first-round picks at defensive tackle. You're going to have to replace that. Rayshawn Benny, Trey Williams, Damon Payne, those are all names that I think are going to be in that rotation. Rayshawn Benny, he's going to be the leader here. One of the few remaining rotation players from the 2023 National Championship team, 5th-year senior. He's going to be tasked with kind of keeping up that standard, and he's appeared in 42 career games, has 56 tackles over the past 2 years, recorded a sack in the spring game. I know the spring game's like whatever, but this is a guy that's a leader on that Michigan defense, should really step in and take over as that kind of number 1 defensive tackle for the Wolverines. Trey Williams, he's probably the closest, at least physically, to what Kenneth Grant brings to the table. Kenneth Grant, obviously, at almost 340 pounds, kind of a hard guy to replicate physically, but Trey Williams, 6'2", 315, pretty close, I guess. Also, he's kind of flashed the pass rushing ability to be a more complete defensive tackle, complements that space-eating stature. I think he's probably going to be the number 2 defensive tackle. Had 14 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 2 sacks last season. Only started 3 games for Clemson, but appeared in all 14. I think that's going to be a guy that, if he's not that second defensive tackle, at the very minimum, he's going to be rotating in for Michigan this year. Damon Payne from Alabama is another guy I'm looking at to try to fill that rotation. He only has 30 total tackles in his career, only ever has half a sack than all 3 seasons he's kind of played, so definitely more of a space-eating run defender in Damon Payne, but still a guy that should definitely get playing time for Michigan as they try to keep that elite defensive line going. That's something that's been a theme for Michigan in the past 5 years, at least, I would say. Micah Williams and Jalen Walker to a lesser extent, but they're really going to have to replace that production on the pass rush from Georgia. But they brought in a guy in the spring portal, and Ela Medozier from Army, West Point, had a breakout season last year. Smaller guy, 6'3", 245, but 34 tackles, 6.5 sacks in his sophomore season. And I think this is going to be a guy, he could take some time to adjust to SEC. Just the level of play, his body type, a little smaller. But I would not be surprised at all if he kind of takes over that jack role for Georgia, takes over what Micah Williams was doing. There's a couple other guys, Gabe Harris Jr., Quintavious Johnson, that may factor in there, but they're a lot less proven, I think, and the fact that Georgia went out to get Medozier in the spring portal says a lot about what they were kind of expecting from that position. Then one of the other programs I kind of think is kind of interesting of how they're going to replace two guys that really had a big impact for them is Penn State. How do you replace Abdul Carter on the defensive side of the ball, as well as what Tyler Warren did for them offensively? With Abdul Carter, that answer looks a little more simple. Danny Dennis-Sutton is going to be the number one defensive end, number one pass rusher for Penn State. Obviously, he had a really great year last year, too. 13 tackles for loss, 8.5 sacks while playing on the other side of Abdul Carter. Also was 27th nationally among edge rushers in pressure rate. He was at 12.5% pressure rate. Abdul Carter was number one at 19.6%, which is a pretty incredible number. But he really leveled up in the 3 playoff games that Penn State had a good chunk of his TFLs and sacks actually during that time. Also, his pressure rate ticked up about another 2%. Kind of seems ready to take over as that primary pass rusher. This is a team that, again, is going to be right in the hunt for a college football playoff berth, for a potential Big Ten championship, potentially even a national championship. But also, I think, who's going to be on the other side of Danny Dennis-Sutton? That's going to be the big question mark here. Will he attract more double teams just because Abdul Carter's gone? And how he kind of reacts to those, I think, is going to be really interesting to look at. But this is definitely going to be the main guy on defense for Penn State, the guy that they're going to look to get a sack, get a big stop on third down, and the guy that's going to try to replace what Abdul Carter did, which obviously is a pretty Herculean task. But an even more Herculean task is replacing what Tyler Warren did. You can't really, honestly, the guy lined up everywhere, basically in the backfield, across the line of scrimmage. And so it's going to be, I think, also a little bit on the receivers, on the running backs to kind of fill in some of those gaps where he did. But in terms of tight ends, Khalil Dinkins does return. He was kind of the number 2 tight end last year. He has had 14 catches, 122 yards last year, 2 touchdowns, but he's definitely going to play. Even if he might not be the number 1 tight end, will for sure have playing time because he's a really strong blocker. Penn State likes to have him in when they're running the ball. Obviously, this is a run-heavy team. May even lean on it even more this year, just because Katron Allen, because Nick Singleton are back. You obviously get another year of that backfield. Khalil Dinkins can be a guy that can block for them at the absolute minimum. I think he also has a little more pass-catching ability than people kind of expect. And then the other guy, I think, Luke Reynolds. This is a guy that has some really high hopes. He's going to be a true sophomore. Was a number 70 overall player in the 2024 class. Had 9 catches for 111 yards and a touchdown last season. Also had 3 catches in college football playoff games. And also had a 32-yard run against Minnesota. So a little more versatile, a little more of the skill set of what Tyler Warren brought to the table. and a guy that can definitely step up into a bigger role in year 2. I think that's certainly very possible. But again, that's going to be really tough to replace Tyler Warren's production. And how Penn State does it, I think, is going to be a really interesting storyline that plays out throughout the 2025 season. So we're going to take our second break of the show. And when we come back, I want to talk a little bit about some undrafted free agents that I think could make some impacts and make NFL rosters and potentially have really good careers. But first, we're going to take a short break on the GSMC College Football Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
Welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast on this Tuesday, April 29th. I want to talk a little bit about some of the undrafted free agents who I think could make impacts on NFL rosters, or at the very minimum, make NFL rosters. First guy I have, Xavier Restrepo out of Miami. He did sign with the Tennessee Titans after the draft, but this is a guy, 2023 first team All-ACC, 85 catches, almost 1,100 receiving yards in that season, 6 touchdowns, and then again followed it up in 2024. First team AP All-American, first team All-ACC, 69 catches, 1,127 receiving yards, 16.3 yards per reception, tied for 7th in the FBS with 11 receiving touchdowns. Guy that started every game, didn't play in the bowl game, but this is a kid that has had proven production, has shown he can be a really quality target in the slot. He's going to be a slot-only guy. 5'10", 209, so not super big, but really crafty. Knows how to maximize his skill set, knows how to run routes, when to drop down, when to sit, when to come back to the ball, give his quarterback an option. Really great footwork, leverage, has quick bursts, so he's able to create separation, even though he's not the fastest in terms of flat-out speed. I think that was probably one of the main reasons that he fell all the way out of getting drafted. Was he ran about it was a 4.83 40. Really, really poor time for a wide receiver, especially a guy that is not that big, is supposed to rely more on quickness and speed. So the fact that he ran that slowly, I think that really hurt his draft stock and was probably the main reason that he fell out of being drafted. But this is a guy that I think, if you look past that tape speed, he plays faster. If you look past the speed from the combine, he plays faster on tape. He's able to create separation. He's able to sit down in routes. He picks up blitzes. He can do a lot of different things, I think. And it's a guy that is joining a really good situation in Tennessee, where they do need to add some playmakers there. Don't have a lot at the wide receiver position. I think a guy that at the minimum can make that roster and potentially even play a lot. Another guy that I think there's a different reason, but super talented, Isaiah Bond, 5'11", 180. In 2023 with Alabama, he led the team with 48 receptions, just under 700 receiving yards that year, had 11 starts, and then transferred to Texas, played in all 14 games last year, 12 starts, only 34 catches, 540 receiving yards, but he also suffered a high ankle sprain in the SEC championship game against Georgia. The big reason, though, I think he was accused of sexual assault, and Bond turned himself in on a sexual assault warrant that was issued by the Fresco Police Department in Texas on April 10th. He was released after posting bail, and then he also released a statement calling the allegations against him, quote, patently false. On April 15th, then, Bond filed a complaint with the U.S. District Court of Northern Texas, alleging he was a victim of, quote, false allegations and coercion attempt. But I think that whole situation that kind of played out legally was part of the reason that Bond fell out of being drafted. Also, I think kind of his comments before the combine, where he was claiming he was going to run a sub 4.2 40 and then ended up running right around a 4.4, ran a 4.39 official 40. But when you're claiming that you're going to run a sub 4.2 40, when you're claiming you're going to beat Matthew Golden, and then you don't really run even close to it. I think that also kind of rubbed teams the wrong way, maybe. But this is a guy that is a really talented wide receiver. He's fluid, he's fast, has a lot of untapped potential. He kind of played a decoy role for a lot of what Texas did, but clearly he has the talent to take on a more focused, productive role as a wide receiver. Pretty capable route runner, has good hands. He can kind of play outside or from the slot, and an offense that feeds him a little more dosage of targets, gives him routes that he really likes, shallow crosses, deep digs, quick throw games, kind of giving the ball, putting it in his hands, allowing him to make magic with the ball, turn a small play into a big one. That can be where Isaiah Bond can really help an NFL franchise. Is a tough player, but he can struggle sometimes on combat catches, on going against contact-oriented coverage. That's kind of some areas he struggles, but he's also just an explosive athlete, has above average skill, and a guy that I think can do a lot in an NFL offense if he gets kind of in the right system. And he still has not signed with anyone yet, but I wouldn't be surprised if he does end up being signed by someone, takes a fly on him at some point. Another guy I was kind of surprised by was Seth McLaughlin, center. He did not get drafted. Obviously was at Alabama in 2023, started all 14 games there, entered the portal right after they lost to Michigan in the Rose Bowl, then decided to transfer to Ohio State, where he had a really great year this past season, 2024. Won the Remington Trophy, which is the award for the nation's top center, second team AP All-American, first team All-Big Ten, started 10 games for the Ohio State Buckeyes, but then suffered a torn Achilles in practice, missed the final 6 games of that season. I think that's really kind of the big reason that McLaughlin went undrafted, is injury concerns, how he'll come back from that Achilles tear. But this is a guy that he will only be a center. He's only a center prospect, but super intelligent, knows exactly what he wants to do on each play before the ball is snapped. A guy that can organize the offensive line, a leader on an offensive line, gritty, just a gritty player, has really good core strength, able to pull, block, effectively get to the second level. Doesn't have ideal kind of knockdown strength, but he has the technique to be a really great center. But a lack of length, I think, in terms of arms and also just his range kind of was also part of the reason that he fell. He will need to work on that if he wants to succeed in the NFL. But also signed with the Cincinnati Bengals, who has Ted Karras as their center, but really doesn't have a lot of depth on that offensive line. They've had struggles on the O-line the past couple of years. I think this is a really good landing spot for Seth McLaughlin, a place that he could potentially become a full-time starter down the line. Another guy that I really liked was Jared Ivey. Jared Ivey from Seattle. from Ole Miss, signed with the Seattle Seahawks. A guy that's been productive for 3 years. 2022, played in all 13 games, 7 starts, had 37 tackles, 4.5 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks. Then 2023, 11.5 tackles for loss, 5.5 sacks, Peach Bowl MVP, all 13, 12 starts, had 46 tackles. Then 2024, third-team All-SEC, 12 games and 11 starts, 42 tackles, 10.5 tackles for loss, 7 sacks. So this is a guy that has had 3 straight seasons of really productive years. I'm kind of surprised that he didn't get drafted. I really thought he was going to be a fourth, fifth round pick, but it kind of seems like his strengths, weaknesses lead to an almost feast or famine type of playing style. His rush is kind of segmented. It's really leggy. Doesn't have a lot of short area closing burst. Not a strong anchor. Doesn't have great contact, but he's really slippery. He's able to kind of use that stride, that length, and swivel his upper body, shapeshift, circumvent blocks. Does need to play with a little more edge, I think, but definitely has a lot of disruption potential to be a 4-3 defensive end down the line. Also sub-rush potential kind of on the inside on different packages. I think that's also a big thing here with Jared Ivey. I forgot his name for a minute. Jamin Dumas-Johnson, I think, is another guy from the Packers, going to the Packers. Former Georgia guy, transferred to Kentucky this past season. Kind of really struggled at Kentucky. Looked lost at times there. He still led the team with 67 tackles, had 7 tackles for loss and 3.5 sacks, but not nearly as productive as he was at Georgia, not as impressive on tape. If you look at 2022, on that national championship team, he started all 15 games for them. He led the team with 9 tackles for loss, was a second-team All-AP All-American that year, had 70 tackles, 4 sacks in 22 for the national champion Bulldogs. Then also 23, started the first 9 games, then he missed the rest of the regular season because he broke his left forearm. But in those 9 games, 34 tackles, 5.5 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks, 2 pass breakups. This is a guy that has had a ton of production in his career. His Georgia tape is really impressive. And I'm kind of surprised that he wasn't drafted just based off of what he did at Georgia in those 2 seasons. I think probably a lot of it had to do with kind of his lack of consistency on his 2024 tape at Kentucky. But I think this is a guy that has 3 down, definitely a 3rd down option. He knows how to track down the ball. Doesn't have a lot of speed, explosiveness, but just he's around the ball all the time. A guy that had a ton of production at a high level program. And I'm kind of surprised that he wasn't anybody took a flyer on him at a certain time. Then the last guy that I think is really kind of interesting, Tommy Hill, cornerback from Nebraska. This is a guy that has pretty good length for the position, 6.5 inches, 6 foot, 213, about good size, good length. He had an interesting career at Nebraska. Played in 11 games in 2022, and then the second half of that year, he switched from cornerback to kind of a wide receiver kick returner role. Didn't have any receptions then. Then 2023, he spent the first half of the season as a 2-way player. Again, didn't have receptions, no reception on offense. Then focused on cornerback the second part of that season. Honorable mention All Big Ten conference cornerback. 4 interceptions, 9 pass breakups that year. And then this past season, only played in 7 games, 5 starts, missed the last 6 games with plantar fasciitis. But this is a guy that's got really interesting traits, good top-end speed for a cornerback, but kind of needs to work on transitions, on his short area burst. Much better in terms of zone coverage right now. Can read routes really well. Has the ball skills, kind of the length to squeeze, to close down throwing windows around him. And I think this is a guy that if you look at that 23 tape, it's a lot more impressive. But definitely needs more experience. Doesn't have a lot of career snaps at cornerback. Can be fooled kind of by press release at times, stem fakes and man coverage. Also, though, I think this interesting point of this was his athleticism score, which is kind of estimated just in terms of all the combine drills they do and that stuff. His athleticism score was a 94 overall, and that was first among 2025 cornerback prospects. I really thought that was kind of an impressive trait, and just the fact that he has that much athletic ability kind of bodes well towards his development, what he could potentially do down the line with more reps, with more time in an NFL system. I think that's a guy that could have an impact somewhere down the line for a franchise. So I want to take another short break now. When we come back, we're going to talk a little bit about the Pac-12, their new TV deal for this upcoming season, what it means, and what it means for their future in 2025 and beyond. But we'll be back shortly on the GSMC College Football Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.
Welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast. Just talked a little bit about some undrafted free agents I think could have an impact potentially down the line. I want to switch gears and talk a little bit about the Pac-12 announcing they've come to a TV deal for this upcoming season. Obviously, two-team conference right now, but it was announced this morning that all 13 home games for Oregon State and Washington State during this upcoming season are going to air on one of three television networks. 9 of those games are going to air on the CW, which had all of their slate last season. Then 2 are going to be on CBS, on the main CBS channel, and 2 are going to be on ESPN. So Pac-12 Commissioner Teresa Gould, she put out a statement saying, having Pac-12 football featured across the leading broadcasters in CBS, the CW, and ESPN in 2025 will provide tremendous exposure to showcase Oregon State, Washington State, and our brand in the Pac-12's final season before expansion. This was an interesting deal. I'm not surprised that the CW is still the main component of their TV deal. Obviously, after this upcoming season, they're going to be expanding to include San Diego State, Boise State, Colorado State, Fresno State, Utah State, all of whom are going to come from the Mountain West. I'm curious to see what that is going to look like, though. They still have not secured or at least announced a TV deal for this new conference that's going to occur in 2026. Though this announcement today could kind of offer a potential glimpse into the type of TV deals they're looking at. Teresa Gould had previously said that the Pac-12 is really only looking at TV partners that could be partners for them long-term as well. So it sounds like CW, CBS, ESPN sounds like could all potentially be in the running for a new Pac-12 deal. The other obviously big thing here is the Pac-12 still does need to add another team, another program for the 2026 season in order to be a football conference. They have 7 teams right now. They need an 8th. I know my video on potential Pac-12 expansion got a lot of hate, but I think Texas State could be one of those teams. They're going to look to add some other programs, UNLV potentially, but the Mountain West, the way they restructured their grant of rights, it prohibits UNLV from pretty much leaving. It'll be interesting to see. Pac-12 is obviously going to need another team, another program to join the conference before they are able to play football in 2026. Obviously, I would be highly surprised if somehow they did not add somebody and the conference fell through. That's very unlikely. But I think it's going to be interesting to see what their TV deal will look like in the future after this 2025 season. Though this is interesting, I think the CW, they're retaining the rights to 9 of the 13 home games. The other 4 are going to be split. So the 2 on the CBS channel is going to be Washington at Washington State, September 20th, and then also Oregon State versus Washington State in Corvallis. That's going to be on CBS as well. Then ESPN, they're going to get the Cal at Oregon State game, as well as Houston at Oregon State. So, but the announcement didn't provide any details past this upcoming season. I really think it's going to be interesting kind of what happens with the Pac-12. I'm not sure who they're going to add. Obviously, we'll see. I think Texas State is a really big contender here. Obviously, UNLV is being talked about. Sacramento State, I don't think is going to join in 2026, but in the couple years after that, I could actually really see it. I know people were hating on that, but it's very possible. We'll see. There's some of the other Texas schools, but they're going to have to add someone. They're going to have to add at least one team, probably 2 or 3. We're going to see what happens there with Pac-12. I don't love this. I don't love the idea that the Pac-12 is going to be on the CW for the most part. It doesn't really seem like that's the type of TV station they should be going after. Seems almost like a step down for them. I think they're probably going to try to target more of the CBS, ESPN packages. I think it will be kind of a package deal where it's going to be spread across multiple networks and not just one. How that's going to kind of play out and break down is going to be interesting to look at. I think it's also going to depend on who the Pac-12 actually is going to add in this upcoming season. We're going to see what they do. I don't know. I'm not sure who they're going to take. I know. We'll see. I think it's Texas State probably realistically makes the most sense to get into that Texas market. But the TV deal for right now for 2025 is set. We will see Pac-12 football on national television this upcoming year. Whether that's going to happen in 2026, that remains to be seen. We'll see what happens, though, with that. And I want to take another short break on the show. When we come back, we're going to talk about our last segment of the day. And could Arch Manning actually stay at Texas for 2 years? We're going to talk about it later. Right now, we're going to take a short break on the GSMC College Football Podcast. Welcome back to the GSMC College Football Podcast, presented to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I want to talk a little bit now about, could Arch Manning actually stay at Texas for the next 2 seasons? So, according to Field Yates, who appeared on the Adam Schefter show this week, he said that the word from people that have been visiting Texas for scouting visits has been that they expect Arch Manning to be there for 2 more seasons. He also said, will that prevail? We'll see, but that has been the sentiment that scouts have been gathering when they spend any time around the Texas program this past season. Also, Mel Kiper said something on Adam Schefter's podcast where he kind of said the same thing. He said, we're not going to get Arch next season. I think Arch will go back. I don't know if the Mannings will allow Arch after 1 year as a starter to come out. There's a lot more to this than I think people realize. Obviously, pretty much every early 2026 mock draft that we see has Arch Manning as a top 5 draft pick, potential number 1 draft pick, but that's only after 1 year as a starter. That's anticipating he does leave Texas early. Obviously, this is a guy that he hasn't really played a whole lot either. Didn't really see any time as a freshman. Came in 2024. He came in against UTSA in September, completed 9 passes for 223 yards and 4 touchdowns in that game. Also had 53 yards on the ground. Then Ewers was injured, so he started the next week against Louisiana Monroe, 258 passing yards, pair of touchdowns then. Then once again the starter against Mississippi State, 26 of 31, 325 yards, 3 total touchdowns in that game. So all in all, 67% of his passes were completed, 9 touchdowns, 2 interceptions, and also kind of really showcased some dual threat ability that obviously neither of his uncles ever had. But 25 yards, 25 times, 108 rushing yards, 4 rushing touchdowns. Also continued to kind of see some time in rushing sub packages, even when Quinn Ewers did return from injury. This is a guy that top-rated recruit in his class by 24/7 Sports Composite. Also the only guy that has stayed at his original school among the top 5 quarterbacks in that class. And this is a thing that was unheard of before, of staying after another year, really. But also in the age of NIL, this can be really lucrative for him. Right now, his NIL valuation is right around $6.6 million, according to On3. So if he does stay, say he performs well in 2025, and then he stays at 26, he could potentially be making $10 million or more as a starting quarterback at Texas. Just kind of depends on what's happening. I think some of it depends on how well he plays this season. If he struggles, it obviously gives him a little more of an incentive to stay at Texas. And this is actually something that Steve Sarkisian talked about this week after kind of the end of their spring practices. They didn't have a spring game this year, but Texas fans kind of asked him if Arch would be there for 2 more years, and here was the quote from Sark. He said, "Here's what I hope. I hope he's got a really hard decision to make on about January 21st. That means we played a long time. That means he probably had a really good season. And that means he's probably trying to figure out, do I want 1 more year in the burnt orange, or is it time to go to the NFL? I hope it's a really hard decision for him." And that was kind of what he was saying. And I think that's pretty true. I think it's pretty accurate. Another thing to kind of consider here, though, too, is the family history of the Mannings. So obviously Peyton, he could have came out after his junior year, decided to stay for his senior. Same thing happened with Eli. He could have come out after his junior year, and he decided to stay and play another year in college. I don't know, obviously, how much that impacts Arch's decision, but I think that could be another factor, as you have, your uncles. They could have came out, they stayed, they got their degrees. His dad got his degree from Ole Miss. Could that actually still be a factor in Arch Manning's decision, is staying, getting your degree right away, finishing out school, and then going to the NFL? I think that is potentially a factor. I don't know if that's as big of a thing. That I think it's kind of being overblown in the media of that Manning family legacy. Mel Kiper talked about it when he was on Schefter's podcast, but I don't know if that's really the main reasoning for him. I think he just kind of wanted it sounds like he just really kind of wants to stay there and do his own thing. Then you just got to look at, he has only ever played 260 snaps in his 2 years at Texas. So if you compare that, Ewers last year had 900 snaps, 2,300 in his college career. So even if Arch Manning hits 1,300 snaps this year, takes Texas to a national championship appearance, kind of in a hypothetical scenario, his resume would still be a lot shorter. The experience he'd have would still be a lot shorter than most of the other quarterbacks that came out. Obviously, Jackson Dart, 3,100 career snaps. Cam Ward, 2,500 career snaps. And then on the really high end, if you look at like Dylan Gabriel, who basically was a 5 or 6 year starter, he had 4,500 snaps. But this is a guy that doesn't have a lot of experience, is, I think, going to be a really great quarterback in the NFL. Well, in college first. We're going to have to wait and see what he does for Texas this upcoming season. He is going to lose a couple guys on the outside, losing Matthew Golden, losing Isaiah Bond, losing Gunnar Helm. But you have Ryan Wingo still. You bring in Mosley from Stanford. You bring in Jack Endries. So there's still options here for Arch. But obviously, Sark said this too. He's like, Arch is a great player, but let's not get ahead of ourselves. We still haven't really seen him play. He's like, let's just give this kid the opportunity of what he wanted to be the Texas starting quarterback and just let him do what he did. Apparently, he said it was a lifelong dream for Arch to be the Texas quarterback. He was talking about how there's been videos and pictures of Arch as a little kid wearing a Longhorn jersey, talking about wanting to play for Texas. And now it is finally his time to do that. It's finally his time to take over, fulfill that dream, become the quarterback at Texas. And I don't know if he wants to just stay 1 year, if that really is your dream, if that's really what you want to do. I would think you probably want to stay as long as you can. You stay 2 years. I don't think his draft stock will probably be affected. But again, this is really preliminary. We have no idea how he's going to play this season. We don't know, could Arch Manning actually flame out and just not be a great starting quarterback? It's certainly a possibility. I don't think it's a very high possibility. I think his talent level, what he's done in the past 2 years, is just really interesting. Anthony said, I think Arch is going to stay at Texas. I saw other report saying he wants to play 4 years at Texas. Yeah, I think this is kind of the consensus right now. We're still going to hear draft pundits talk about, will he come out in this next season? But we have to see his play on the field first. That's the biggest thing to see here, is how he's going to perform, how he's going to do as the actual starting quarterback at Texas. We've seen him play in some pinch games. We've seen him start a couple games, but those games were against Louisiana Monroe, against Mississippi State, who had a rough year last year, and then he played against UTSA. So not super strong programs. It's not like he's running through the gauntlet of the SEC. It's going to be a big challenge, big difference of stepping into the starting role and having to go through the entire conference and having to be the guy all the time. Obviously, he's been used to having eyes on him throughout his entire life, right? That just comes with the Manning last name. That comes with who his uncles are, who his grandfather is. And I don't know if, I wonder, that 2026 quarterback class is also going to be really solid. I think you have Drew Aller, you have Cade Klubnik, you have Lenore Sellers, you have Garrett Nussmeier, and those are just the guys off the top of my head that could potentially be first-round picks. I agree. I don't think it's fair that you can say he's the number one quarterback in the 2026 class just because you haven't seen him play at all, really. And when you compare him to those other guys, Drew Aller has been a 3-year starter. Garrett Nussmeier threw for 4,000 yards last year. Lenore Sellers started all last season, had a really great season of just flashes, led South Carolina to 9 wins. We haven't seen Arch Manning do anything like that yet. So I think it is projection to, Carson Beck too. Carson Beck had a really solid career at Georgia, is going to step into a new role at Miami, and in a high-powered offensive scheme, could produce a lot. There's a lot of guys that could potentially be first-round quarterbacks in this upcoming year. I think that draft class is a lot more impressive than this past year's. And I do think it's unfair to say that Arch is the number one quarterback in this upcoming class, because we haven't seen him do it, and we've seen other guys that have more production right now. But the pressure is going to be on him right away. Week 1, he's got to go play Ohio State, defending national champions, at Ohio State in the shoe. That's going to be a really big-time matchup. I think we're going to see what he's going to have to do. I think Sellers is going to do what Manning's going to do. Yeah, I'm really, really big on Lenore Sellers. Obviously showed flashes of what he can do last season, both in terms of passing and rushing ability. I had about 160 rushing yards in their game against Clemson last year, but I think he's also just going to take another step, be on that next level. Definitely an option for the number one potential pick, just seeing kind of how he shakes out this next season. But we're going to see what Arch Manning is going to have to do. Will he be able to go into Ohio State, beat them at home? Will he be able to go into the swamp, beat them at home? Will he be able to go into Georgia and beat them at their home? These are going to be really big question marks for Arch Manning, and we're going to have to see what his season kind of shakes out. But I wouldn't be surprised if he is a 2-year starter at Texas and he does end up staying for another season and won't enter the draft until 2027. So with that, we are going to end our show for the day. Thank you so much for tuning in to the GSMC College Football Podcast. Please remember to subscribe, like, follow the show. And if you want, you can go to Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok for even more sports content, sports updates that you love. Thank you so much, and have a great day.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that great. I don't want